companies. How do you see building values through such controlled transactions? And how do you finance the same? Is it entirely funded from capital or you also have leverages?
So I think in terms of how we think about financing or funding our acquisitions, I would say that's one of the most important and critical decisions we kind of take when we are actually making an investment. I think what determines the sources of funding actually is the nature of the business. What we think about capital structure as solving two problems. One is around growth and the other is around risk. I think if you're investing for a longer term, then you look for more equity, less debt, and even within debt, obviously the mix of debt. But I think the risk is actually the more important part. I think some businesses fundamentally have higher operating risk. So if businesses are cyclical, if their cash flows are more volatile, then we obviously look to bring in more equity. If we think businesses have less operational risk, then we are willing to put in more financial risk, which is basically increase the leverage. I mean, I think we've invested in two auto components businesses recently. One has more volatility in their earnings, so we've actually fully equity funded the investment. Whereas the other one is a much more stable business. The underlying market is actually more stable, more secular growth. And so we've taken leverage partly to finance that. So that's kind of how we think about the risk. I think in terms to your first question on how we think about creating value, I think we obviously pick markets which we think are fundamentally growthful. But I think as an investor who's very active and who's very engaged, I think we typically look for 3 or 4 key levers that we drive. The first one, which I already covered, which is the capital structure, because equity value creation is a function of growing the enterprise value and then kind of using leverage as a tool to magnify the impact on equity value. But I would say some of the other ones are people. I think given we end up buying mid to the smaller end of large-sized companies in India, I think our ability to attract talent, to drive professionalization, to bring in kind of the right set of people to build those companies. We help with acquisitions and with entry into new markets, especially global markets, using our global connects. I think those are some of the levers we actually pull in addition to the capital structure.
Thank you. For this, I'm tempted to ask you many questions, but I leave it to the audience to please make mental note. If you want to raise few questions later on. So Raghav, if I may come to you, you are quite a successful story in building a large Indian fund and by Indians. How do you raise capital for your own fund and attract investment opportunities? What are the key parameters in selecting your bets?
Yeah, thanks, Rajesh. No, so I think when we started back, just going back in history, when we started back in 99, the private equity industry was just coming along, right? There weren't that many players. I think what I would say is India was clearly a growth market, but the intensity and the scale of growth has changed in the last 10 years. Also, what has happened is I think the depth of the market has increased significantly, and that has also attracted, right, the global private equity funds like, right, Rishi's, Bain, and many other funds now they're operating. So it's a pretty active market, I would say, today. In terms of our strategy, we've been long on this market for the last 25 years. We've raised 10 funds dedicated to this market, so we've been fairly sort of focused on this strategy. We raise money from overseas investors, institutional investors like pension funds, university endowments, and others, and basically act like an emerging market money manager for these institutional investors, right? Somebody who's in sort of North America or Europe, giving them emerging market exposure and growth via India investments. And that strategy has actually panned out reasonably well. We are focused on largely doing equity transactions, unlike sort of, right, structured credit and other pools of capital, which is why at some level we need strong enough growth, right, in their respective industry. For a typical investment that we would make, we look at 2 or 3 things, I would say. Number one is how attractive is the industry, right? Typically, you would want an industry which is, right, growing double digits, moderate cyclicality, and obviously, right, has ideally both a growth access on domestically as well as an export opportunity, number one. Number two is what we can add value to the business, right? I think some point that Rishi was mentioning around augmentation of management team or growing via M&A and brownfield acquisitions. That is again important as you look to sort of grow. And number three is what is the potential exit route, right? Would you go eventually IPO the company or sell the company in a total, right, in a strategic transaction? So if those two or three things align well, I think that's where we get interested and then, right, spend the requisite time to potentially close the transaction.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for this. So if I may ask, you only like, what are the biggest 2 or 3 challenges you find in your kind of investments in the Indian landscape?
Challenges in India are a dime a dozen. So I think goes without saying. But I think one thing we learned very hard, so just go back 10 years, right? I think industrials is a sector I myself have been doing for the last 15 years. China is very dominant in that sector, and we learned it the hard way, right? Back in 2007, 2008, or just before GFC, right? 2006, 2007, we were very positive on Indian auto components, right? Sector saying that there is obviously China and Mexico, but India could emerge as a country of real strength. I think the financial crisis taught us a hard lesson. Number one, of how much cyclicality in this sector can really, right, bring things down. And the largest of companies faced a lot of challenges, number one. And number two is, in a global marketplace, if you have to compete, I think China is definitely front and center there. So you have to evaluate the China risk in a meaningful fashion, right, before building a strong thesis. Because the other challenge in our capital structure is, once we made a bet, you have to hold with that bet for 3, 4, 5, 6 years.
True.
There is no sort of 1 year later, something else is discovered, you can't unwind the bullet, as they say. So I think a couple of those things.
Thank you. Thank you. So Kapil, just shifting to you, I've got a bit of longish question for you. So I can break it in pieces if you want. But AIF, all of us know, has changed the market dynamics completely today. How much it should grow or it will grow, any insight you could give? And what are your views on middle market opportunities in the light of geopolitical conditions as well?
So thank you so much, Mahesh Bhai, for giving me the opportunity to come here and speak. Fundamentally, if you look at the alternative markets, it's been an evolution in my mind in 3 stages. First of all, some big picture numbers for Indian financial sector. The total banking book wholesale financing is close to $1 trillion. If you just combine all the banking book, NBFC book, everything put together, is a sizable number, $1 trillion. If you look at the total alternatives financing, which is private credit, whatever is alternative, which is non-bank. Today, if you include just the performing credit category, which is giving money to well-performing companies, and let's exclude real estate as a sector, that number doesn't exceed a minuscule $5 billion, minuscule. If you include some of the alternative strategies, including distress, special set, that number goes to about a 20, 25, 30. I mean, you can take a pick. The numbers don't matter in the scale we are speaking about. Once you start to combine this as a percentage of the overall opportunity, this is a minuscule 0.5% to maybe 1%, maybe 1.5%. If you look at global markets, they are roughly about 5 to 7%. If you look at the US market, 5 to 7%, sometimes 10%. So purely from a big picture number scale, I know the numbers can be misleading. We've been talking about, India can be a very misleading market from a real addressable opportunity. But just giving you the scale, it is massive. We are just starting. If you look at the phases of growth of the alternative markets in India, I see 3 distinct phases. Till about 2015, the banks dominated this market. There was nobody else other than banks. And then the crisis happened, the AQR happened, Raghuram Rajan came up and cleaned up the system. And then 15 to 18 saw the growth of NBFCs. If you remember, before the IL&FS crisis happened, 15 to 18, banking had slowed down and NBFCs had started growing up. At the peak, I don't know if you recall, the numbers are very stark. At the peak, NBFCs controlled about $300 billion of financing market in India. It's not a small number. The alternative space was 1/3 of the total space. Since the IL&FS crisis and the tightening of the regulations, And in the middle came the IBC. 2016 was the time when IBC came. So if you juxtapose, very simply speaking, 15 banking, 16 IBC, 15 to 18 was the NBFC, and 18 was the crisis of IL&FS. And then we saw Templeton, then we saw Yes Bank, then we saw DHFL, we saw India Bulls. And from 18 onwards is where the alternative space start to take off. Because people need bespoke money, people need governance, people need aligned incentives to do this kind of financing. NBFC was a wrong structure to begin with, in terms of doing alternative financing. It was completely wrong because you were doing what banks couldn't do in a regulated entity. I mean, how silly is that? So after that has happened, 18 onwards, we've seen a space where alternatives took off in a way where alternatives started doing NBFC refinancing until 2021. And 21 onwards, as the economy has gone up, I'm sure some of the esteemed panelists here and most of the people will know, India today is a growth market. It wasn't a growth market until about 21, 22. Manufacturing capacity that stagnated. Today, I see at least 2 or 3 companies a week. The 100 to 500,000 crore companies are growing massively. And that space from a refinancing market today has changed to what we call as speed financing, flexible financing, anything which banks cannot do or will not do because of practical reasons.
Yeah.
So it is almost becoming a mainstream, but the size of the current book is very small. If you ask me, the biggest challenge today is the accessibility to that market. Because accessibility to the market is controlled by few chartered accountants. They're not very well versed with the balance sheets, accounting standards. They're being half-baked deals. So our ability to create large teams, go to tier 2, tier 3 towns and access that market is what is really the big problem for us. I mean, I can speak for the next half an hour on this, but I'll stop here.
Thank you. We'll come back to you. Won't leave you easily. So Nikhil, can I come to you? All of us know US tiered Systematic into a full-service financial services platform for mid-market companies, providing entire life cycle services from IPOs, PE funding to wealth management. How do you see small and mid-market companies facing challenges in moving to the next orbit? Any views?
Thank you. So mid-market is bread, butter, and jam for Systematics. So I mean, that's the